headphones and having it live like this. All right. Well, so moving onward, the idea behind this here is to put a frame on action-powered productivity and the content of action-powered productivity that is a little clearer, a little easier to understand, and a little bit more directed toward one particular focal point. And so let me share my screen here real quick, and I will uh, walk through some of these early ideas behind this here. Okay. So, first of all, when I talk about the miracle in the middle, I'm talking about the fact that when we talk about productivity, there's a lot of talk about intention and there's a lot of talk about action, but we don't necessarily translate what it means to get from the thing you intend to do to the thing that you actually do. And, a lot of productivity advice centers around this idea that we are supposed to know what's important. And that if we know what's important, then we will automatically know how to do it. Now, I do see the primary role of action powered productivity to help you make important work easy. So when you know what the important work is, that you'll be able to make it easy. But I don't suggest that we start by defining what's important. So many of my productivity fellows out there in the world want to say that if you can just define for yourself the work that is important, the things that are important in your life, then you'll know how to achieve it. Or you can just step back from it. If I do this in 6 months and I do this in 3 months and I do this in, which I don't think is a very valuable way to be thinking about approaching your work because it's usually more frustrating than helpful. We set these arbitrary goals, they don't really have any connection to our reality. And so when we then say, I said this was important, why can't I get this done? What we find ourselves battling then is this frustration that now that we even know what things are important, we still can't do them. And it leads to that sort of self loathing and that self doubt and that why am I the way I am and why don't I have the willpower I need? So I don't really think the goal here first is to make important work easy. I think that our goal first is to just make work easy. If we can determine with the things that are in front of us, with the work that we have to do, how do I make that work easy? Then, when we create the time, the bandwidth, the term that I'll use later in this presentation, then I am in a position to take that work that I see as important and make it easy because I have the mechanics, I have the skills, I have the techniques to know how to make them easy. So, I say we talk about intention. What is it that I plan to do? We talk about action. What is it that I actually accomplish? The big question is, how do we get from one to the other? And it made me think as I was preparing this. I remember years and years ago in math, seeing this cartoon by the cartoonist Sidney Harris that shows a little complicated math on the left, a little complicated math on the right, a little solution, and then in the middle, the phrase, then a miracle occurs. And of course, the caption being, I think you should be more explicit here in step two. And I think when we talk about intention and action, we really need to be more explicit here in step two. What is the thing that moves us to action? Well, in my book, The Rhythms of Productivity, which is available on Amazon if you're interested in looking that up. If you type the rhythms with an S, you'll get there pretty quickly. I define now as the duration of your attention to one thing. How long are you attending to? How long are you paying attention to one particular action or one particular act of leisure or one particular, it's all everything we do ultimately is an action. But how long is your attention to that? That is now from a productivity sense. And it gives us the key to what we're going to talk about here. And that is the thing that links intention to action is attention. So when we talk about intention coming to action, the thing that we have to have in the middle is attention. And that first reaction may be, RJ, I already cannot control my attention. That's the problem that I have. So you rely on my attention to get everything done. And this kind of goes into a mistaken understanding of what I'm going to be talking about with attention. We get this idea that attention is something that has to be forced. Attention is something that has to be held. We say something holds your attention. Attention is something that has to be wrested from one thing and placed manually on something else. And that's not what I mean by attention. Our our attention naturally craves, the food that we either feed it or that is kind of scattered around. Our goal with productivity attention is to feed our attention the right information at the right time. So that, and we'll talk about this as we go through, but the general idea is this: if I intend to take action on something, it's not that I need to force my attention onto the intention and then hope that I'm able to have the willpower or the discipline to actually complete the action. It's that when my attention goes to the desire to take that action, I want it to be fed with everything it needs to be able to complete that action. Our goal in action powered productivity is to make sure that when we arrive at a particular intention, as at a particular action, that everything we need to complete that action is available and at hand. We feed our attention the things that it needs to execute the action. When we do that, when the things are naturally available, the action follows. It's much, much simpler. It's much, much smoother. When instead we get to that moment and I have to go find this thing and I have to go find that thing and I have to go look at this report and I have to go figure out, maybe even the task doesn't even tell me what I'm supposed to do. And so I have to figure out what the heck I was talking about. Well, your attention's going to go somewhere else. It just is. There isn't anything here for it to feed on that is of any value toward completing the thing you intended to complete, and therefore it's going to find somewhere else to go. Okay? That leads us into what I'm going to call the three F's here of attention. You heard me use the first one. In order to get that first layer of making work easy, we have to feed our attention. If we're not feeding our attention, then we're not going to get anything accomplished because our attention will head off. Remember, none of the F's are force. We're not trying to force the attention on the action. We're trying to, as we bring it here, provide it everything that it needs, all the materials, all the relevant information, so that it doesn't have to go anywhere else to find its nourishment. We're going to feed it. Second thing is we're going to filter it, and this is the little bit of the miracle. I'll define it here in a moment when we get to that in the process. We don't want our attention over time to be constantly demanded by every single action. And what we discover is as we get more effective at putting our attention, on or serving to our attention would be a better way to put that, everything it needs to complete an action, we'll do that work again. And when we do that work again, it's already easier to get there. It actually requires less attention as we do it again in the future. And so we filter that attention because we don't require as much of it. And so it gets narrowed down to the things that are actually demand our attention. And I want to be clear, this is not an assertion that no work should ever require our attention. There are certain kinds of, things, certain kinds of creative work, certain kinds of, longer term things that will certainly demand our attention. The goal with this filter phase is to make sure that all of those things that should not put too much of a demand on our attention do not put too much of a demand on our attention, so that it's available. It's free. The bandwidth is available. The attention is available to be able to expend on the more creative or the more long-term sorts of work. And then last, flow. I said at the beginning, our goal first isn't to make important work easier. Our goal is to make work easy. Well, when we get to the point that we have this skill, a technique to feed the attention, we have the skill technique to filter it, then we can really say, okay, what is the critical work? And we can allow our attention to flow naturally by the way that we've designed our systems to that work, which is the most critical and is the most important. So these are our three F's. Let's go through each of them in turn: feed, filter, and flow. When we talk about feeding, attention will land where you set the table. If you have set the table for an action to be completed, if you've scheduled the task, but when you scheduled the task, you also included, and I'll show some examples of this, everything that's relevant to it. You have a project and it has all of the notes and everything assembled. When you go to that place, you have the things you need in front of you to take action. You're not going and searching for everything. So you set that table, then the attention will have some place for nourishment. It'll have some place to feed. It is not, and I want to be clear because it sounds like it could be saying, put everything possible in front of your attention. I do not mean that. I do not mean overwhelm it. And I think it's one of the biggest mistakes that we make when we're putting together, I'm a Tana user, so I can put together all kinds of various dashboards. So can other folks who are using tools for thought or things that are tools for thought adjacent, some of the note takers. Um, we think, well, as long as I have everything available to me all the time, then I will be able to find whatever I need. And of course, the opposite is true. The more dashboards we throw in front of ourselves, the less likely we are to be able to find what we actually need when we actually need it. There's too much. We're overwhelming the attention rather than nourishing it, rather than feeding it. And so that's not the goal. The goal is not put everything you could possibly ever need in front of you. Your goal is attached to the particular action, attached to the particular intention, those things that are relevant to turning that intention into action, so that when you arrive there, those are the things that you see. Those are the things that your attention is fed. Not you arrive at the action and now you have 37 dashboards about various other things. It's like when somebody has across their desk, 14 different little piles of paper, and hopefully only 14. I've seen worse. I've lived worse before I got into the, learning how to be a more productive person. You think, well, as long as I keep it out here in front of my attention, I'll do it. But of course, anything more than one, and your attention can't actually be on it all at once. Well, multitasking doesn't exist. That's another conversation. But the point being, we can't overwhelm it. The goal is attach what is relevant to the particular intention so that you can convert it into action, and your attention will have something to feed on when it arrives there. So every action that requires attention should include everything that you need to execute it. That's what feed means. So the mechanic of feed comes down to that you can effectively capture the information, the task, whatever that is that you need, so that it will surface when you need it and where you need it. Notes will show up when you need them. Tasks, when they show up, are clear and they're actionable. Daily agendas that allow us to plan for our days. They make decisions easier. So when I arrive at a particular moment, rather than with respect to David Allen and getting things done, rather than what I call mind like molasses, my play on his mind like water, of looking at 45 different projects and saying, let me choose between these 45 different next actions. I actually arrive at a moment where there's only two or three options because I made that decision before. I'm not arriving at a moment with all these various things. My attention is not being scattered a million different places. The one thing I want to highlight here on this slide before I leave it, when I talk about things just being there and available when you need it, is the word surface is critical. I'm not talking about I am able to retrieve something. I'm talking about I have set up my approach, and this doesn't need to be that difficult to do. I've set up my approach so that the things automatically arrive at my attention when I am in the space to do that particular work. If I get to the space and then I have to go get it, that's an extra step that my attention is given the possibility of going somewhere else. If instead it can be brought to me, at the very least, I can be linked to it directly, then I'm going to have a much better chance of stepping from intention to action because my attention is on the things needed to make that transition. Let me share a few examples here, and I think I'll double check my screen sharing here as I do this. I think I've set this up so it'll show up here on the same screen. As I said before, and this will be true of all the examples, I use Tana, so I'm going to show you some examples in Tana. That does not mean that Tana is the only tool in which you can operate this sort of methodology. All that matters is that you can set up your notes, set up your tasks, set up your plans, set up those things so that they will show up when you are in the relevant space. How you'll see me do it here is how I've built it in Tana, but that doesn't mean the same concept can't be applied elsewhere. So I'm going to hop into these examples, and I will continue to the external site, Canva. Thank you for your help there. I've moved into my examples for feed here, and let me, in the interest of not overwhelming anybody else's attention, close up a couple of those before I move on. First things first, one of the key things you can do to manage and manage is maybe the wrong word there, to feed, I'll just go back to feed, your attention, is that when you have a task that arrives in front of you to convert intention to action, when that attention is placed on a task, that I'm not then trying to figure out what I need to do in order to complete that task. And that means it has to be written well. It has to have a verb at the front, tells me what the action is. But if there's any way, if there's any outside tool, if there's any app that I need, if there's any particular information I need, I should be able to link to that information. So in this particular case, this is saying savings transfers for the week. So when, I have I know when certain things of my wife and I are, when financial things are going to come in, I have some autumn, whoever is available, up to see a concert with the Pittsburgh Symphony Orchestra, which, side note, excellent world-class orchestra, just an hour and 15 minutes north of here, which is nice. This just takes one-off tasks too, but it gets easier when they're recurring because you recognize each time, oh, that could have been easier if I had this, and you can attach it as you go. I'm just became a member of the National Association of Pastoral Musicians. That's church musicians, and they have a conference coming up this summer. They have actually 4 or 5 of them, and so I can review that and see which one I want to attend, if any works with my own church schedule and that sort of thing. So how do I do that? Link straight to the conference page. I don't have to go find it. It's just there. Okay? So that's my example for tasks with that. Same idea with projects. If I want to go into a project, I need to know the things that are relevant to that project. I won't look at all 3 of these, but I'll look at one here. Like, for instance, I have a current course going called Tana for Leaders. I have my tasks. They're here. They're relevant. All of these are also configured so they'll show up when I'm planning for the next day. But they are in here so that I can move them around if I want. I can see any notes that I have, the notes on the sessions, the notes on, this is a past version here, the video script and the landing page, anything that I might need, the recurring tasks, the history, if that's relevant. I can view these things in the context of the project so that when I get here for a review or to say, hey, is there any work that I need to do that don't have scheduled? I have everything available to me to execute that. I don't have to go find it. I don't have to go dig through any folders. I don't have to search for anything. And although search is not horrible as, a stopgap, if you don't, some things you may not have gotten set up correctly, that's normal. When you do, build a system, though, we want to make sure that we have, as much as possible, these things surfacing directly, not having to be retrieved. Same concept. This is the novel that I'm writing here. It has some sub projects, so I can jump in and view those. I can see all the various tasks from all the sub projects scheduled here. Planning to write, so actually planning to do this morning, but actually spent more time doing the final polish on this than I meant to. So I, went ahead and scheduled that for later in the day today, which you'll see in a second. But when I come in here, I want to have everything available that relates to this particular intention. And then the other thing I mentioned were these agendas. If I want to be able to capture what I'm going to do for tomorrow, if I want to give a little plan there, so that when I arrive at tomorrow, it isn't just a free for all, but my future self has at least a shot at executing on, what my intentions are. It's very helpful to lay that out in advance. And so, I can look at, this is today's. When I open it up here, you can see I have my events here and I have my tasks sort of slotted in. Nothing fancy about this, but by doing that, when I get here, I'm done with my call after this one, I get here, I have just a few things that are options for me to do in that moment, and I'll get them all done because they're, very clearly laid out and set up. So I won't have any trouble with that because I see what I need. And in order to prepare something like this, I need something like what you'll see the following day, which is a nice query. In this case, it's in Tana, so it's a live search here, a search node that brings in all of those events and brings in all of those tasks. There are a few more tasks here than I'll actually have because it's also showing overdue, which in this case includes today's, which I haven't done yet. But it gives me the list of things to choose from so that I can effectively plan for my attention to have something to feed on in the next day. We are not looking for anything that is, hyper complex when we're doing this. We're just saying, when I'm in the moment, when I'm arriving at a particular, intention, whether that be to plan or whether that be executing the plan, I want to have at my fingertips and at my attention's fingertips exactly what I need to turn that intention into effective action. So that brings us back now Let me get into the slideshow. I'll get back to full screen here. Give me a quick second. All right. So now that brings us to this next phase. If we can feed our attention as we have just done there, the beauty of that is, I mentioned that some of those were recurring tasks. The beauty of that is, having done that, it becomes easier to do that over time. Over time, well-designed systems will require less of your attention. There's a certain, I teach singers, and one of the things that's always sort of counterintuitive is the more freely you use your breath, the more breath you have available to use. And there are a couple technical reasons for that that I won't go into on this call, but the same idea is here. The more you feed that attention, the more attention that you will have available because it actually will require less demand on your attention over time. So the more attention you feed, in other words, the less attention you need. And that is the miracle in the middle. This is what's so magical about this process and thinking of it this way is that if I get good, and this requires proficiency with whatever tool you use, and it requires, an awareness over time that you're getting a sense of what do you need to see in an individual moment with an individual task in order for your attention to, naturally flow into action. But if you can do that, you spend some time with that, it will actually require less and less and less of your effort, your time, your bandwidth, and your attention over time. So the more attention you need, or you feed, the less attention you need. And if we kind of picture that as over time, our intention and our action actually get closer and closer together. That's what this awareness and this understanding of attention and how we can feed it brings our intention and our action closer together so that less attention is required. And that's just simply because if you capture something once and you surface it repeatedly, that means you don't have to be constantly recapturing it. You don't have to be constantly reinventing wheels. Recurring tasks will save your memories. You're not going to forget stuff. It's going to show up. Procedures and routines reduce your errors, so you're not doing a bunch of undiscovered rework. You're actually just, able to execute something the way you intended to execute it. Templates, these are the big time savers. They store already completed work because with the work that you do, very often, 70, 80% of it could be done before you even step into it if you save the right kinds of templates. And automations can do work for you. And all of these things, the saved memory, the reduced errors, the completed work saved in advance, the things that are done for you, all of those mean less attention required. Now, am I saying all of this should happen immediately? Am I saying this is something that you can do in 15 minutes? No, this is something you do iteratively as you work, as you discover what needs to be fed to your attention. Then you will be able to do this filter step. You will be able to narrow that attention down because you are capturing, I don't use this term here, but it's my APP term, action powered productivity, capture recurrence. You're capturing that recurrence and that allows your attention to be less expended as you're going through this. Some key examples of this as I step over here. Yes, Canva, it's cool. As I go into here, I have recurring tasks of a few varieties here, kinds that just remind me to assess certain things or review certain things. Review, this is one, as some of you coming into the community recently, I just recently updated the welcome DMs because that's the kind of stuff I forget, and then I look at it and I realize people have been receiving outdated information for the last month and a half. Well, I don't need to forget that if I have a recurring task that's reminding me to go in and check that every so often. These sorts of assessments, they just remind me. And notice I use these weird day cycles. If you read my book, you'll see I say, stop howling at the moon. We don't need to go in weeks and months. We don't need to go in these specified 7 and 28 or 31 day cycles. Because that's what gets us all these piled up things that make us scared of these recurring tasks. When they show up when they're useful, instead of just when the moon says they ought to, when I'm stuck with, some things we can't help. Sometimes the trash delivery is always going to come on, or I guess they don't deliver it, they take it away. The trash pickup's only going to happen, every Thursday. I have to account for that. But for the things I have control over, set them up for, however many days it makes sense or however many weeks or whatever. You're not bound to anybody else's thing with these. These kind of things remind me. These kind of things maintain my work and make sure things don't fall apart. Sometimes I can take, you see that I have my 1,000 words for Time Worn there. Those kind of things that allow me to take ongoing work, excuse me, and turn it into recurring work. All of that are things that I can do with recurring tasks that mean I no longer have to hold it in my head. It will show up to my attention, and I will be able to execute that work because it has arrived at my attention without my having to actively put it there. I've done it once, and it shows up every other time. I have things like my procedures and my what I call a date-driven project template, which just means there are certain kinds of projects that if you know the launch date or the end date, you can predict when everything else needs to be done. And so, I want to be able to capture that. So I can come in, I can review my various procedures and make sure, they're in sync with my work. And I have a packing list here, I don't have to worry that I'm going to leave anything behind. Um, when I'm going on a trip, I can just attach that packing list in Tana. I can attach it to the super tag, but whatever your tool is, I as long as I maintain these, I have something that means that I don't have to worry about my attention going crazy. I have something that's going to walk me through this process and thus demand less of my active focus and energy to keep that attention where it is. Same concept with, like here's my prepare for Holy Week super tag that allows me to, set all these various tasks relative to Easter in a given year. When I do that, I no longer have to think, oh, when am I going to ask Father for the readings he wants to use for the Easter Vigil? Because it will show up to my attention and I will know exactly what to do when it arrives there. Do that once, prepare this thing once, never have to expend the attention of, memory again on that. It's just going to work. This one I'm not going to walk through this all the way, but I have a recurring task. There's one what I call productivity bridge. There's one ease of attention that arrives to me there. Here's a link. This link will take me to all of the various templates I have for all my various worship aids that I need to create throughout the church season. When I get there, I'll have this list of worship aids, and then I can click on this Easter one, and that will automatically open a file in InDesign that is a template, another type of stored information there that I can then work in that template. And then coming out of that is an automation where I just hit a button, it prints it to a booklet, and opens up the email program. So I'm ready to send that right then to the office administrator over at the church so that the worship aid can be printed. All of that, and I could go through there are about 11 or 12 different little things that I've added to that mix that make it so my attention is just shepherded through the process. I don't have to do any hard work in order to keep my focus on that because my attention is fed throughout and it's filtered to only the things that it needs to see. So I don't have to worry about it being lost in the flow of that. Okay. That brings us back to our final phase here, which is flow. When we know once we, are able to do this and make our work easy through feed and filter, then we can start to answer the question of what's important. If we find what's important and we already know how to make this work easy, then we can allow our attention to follow the paths that we have set forth for it. And I think the important thing to note here is that water flows downhill. You can do whatever you want to try to make water flow uphill, but it is not going to do it. Water flows downhill. That's just a function of the way water behaves with the gravity force. Well, everything, but in our case, we'll talk about water. In productivity terms, we need to remember that we flow downhill too. We don't do what's important. We do what's easy. We do what's easy. That's just the way it goes. That's why we're focusing with our feed and our filter on how do we do it easier. We do that because when we make what's important flow downhill, then we go back to our beginning. Then we can make important work easy. It isn't something that we have to, reconfigure now that we're working on important things, quote unquote, important being what we can define, how we define it. And we'll talk about that in a second too. It's that once we have the mechanics, we can apply that to any work. And so it's not a good move, in my opinion, to spend a lot of time at the beginning trying to figure out, what your why is or any of that, because it's only going to lead to frustration if you don't have the mechanics to make work easy. So what we're going to talk about is when we capture our alignment, we can surface what's right. We can surface the things that are right to do because they are aligned with our work. And the way I choose to do that is through the concept of roles. And we're not going to get super deep into roles now because it's important to this, but it's not the critical miracle that happens there between feed and filter. Roles direct action like irrigation channels. We have dug those paths with our roles, and now the water can flow into those channels. And just another definition from my book, so you know what I'm talking about with role. A role is an identity that you embody in your life and work. And so, again, I'm not going to go super deep into this except to show you some examples. But the idea is having solved feed and filter, having made our work easier, then we are equipped to apply that understanding to the most important work that we have. So when your roles define what matters, your attention flows where it's most needed. And my examples of this will just be showing you a few of the roles that I have. And of course, I capture these in Tana, but again, these can be done anywhere. I think about roles in terms of the ones that are of current importance in my life, ones that I aspire to, ones that I have to account for, but are not necessarily ones that I want to continue doing, and ones that I know that I might want to do, but that I don't want to be worried about right now. And when I say all of this is relative to how am I feeding these roles with action? Maybe I shouldn't use the word feed because I'm kind of overburdening it now. How am I filling or fulfilling these roles with action? Hey, there's another F, fulfill. But I can go into one of these, like say, let's go into engaged family man. It'll have a lot of various things in here. So I can just go into this role, and because of the way I have it connected to my various projects and those things, I can see the projects that are associated with my family. I can come in here, I can see all of the various recurring tasks that are associated with my family. And by seeing all of these related things, you can see the feed principle at work here as well. I come in here and to review this role, and everything that I need to understand it is present. It's here. I can make sense of it. I can see, is there action happening that's supporting who I am as a father, as a spouse, as a brother? Are these things here? Are those actions actually fulfilling the role that I want to be, the person that I want to be? If they are, then the path is working. Then I have my feed to filter to flow is directing this action here. If I have a role and I don't have any action flowing to it, or I have a bunch of action flowing that isn't associated with a role, then there's a question to be had. Is this, going in the right direction? One of the folks on the call here, Brian, said to me in a call yesterday, one of the dangers, and he's right, of action-powered productivity is you can get awfully good at doing things that you shouldn't be doing. And the roles are the piece at the end that says, okay, no, we can say what it is that we should be doing and direct our skill at feeding and filtering toward that particular flow. That's what I'm talking about when I talk about this focus on attention and how attention can make a huge difference for the work that we're doing. So let's put it all together here. The miracle in the middle: when you feed your attention, action becomes easy. And then we have this little miracle that happens when you filter your attention, action requires less of it. You don't need as much attention. And then when you flow toward roles, action becomes important. And the things that you do are actually directed toward the critical things that are in your life. Looks again, Brian, looks like you won your over under your over bet here because I am slightly over my 30. We started a little later, so I'm not 40, but I am a little over. I did want to mention before I open up for some questions here that I'm introducing a new product here, an attention audit workshop. One of the things that I think is missing in my product line is this sort of one-off thing. I have, longer cohort things. I have some self-paced things. I think there's room for a more focused thing, and that's what this is: an attention audit workshop to reclaim your attention, realign your system, refocus your work. The first one we're going to do is going to be Saturday, May 24th. We'll have two sessions that day, a 10 to 12 and a 2 to 4. I say two sessions, but they're part of the same thing. It's 4 hour. We just leave some time there for, in my case, lunch, depending on where you may be. Not maybe not lunch for you. live via Zoom. We'll have the replays, and I am only going to have 20 people in there. And this is at that 197 price point, which is quite a bit less than some of my longer cohorts. But I think, and you can also pay it into things if you want. And I include a 30-minute one-on-one follow-up with me so that you can take the things that you've learned and actively applied during that session. And this is something I'm probably going to continue to do. We'll see how the first one works in terms of interest. But so May 24th is that. There is a link here. I'll include it in the YouTube video when that comes out, assuming my shutting it down, shutting the window over here didn't have any effect on that, which it may have. We'll find out. I can always, solve this a different way. But Saturday, May 24th, 10 to 12, and then 2 to 4. Oh, sorry, I went back. So that's it. That's the idea here, is that when we have the capacity and the understanding to feed, filter, and flow our attention, then we are in a position to get our intentions turned into actions much more effectively, much more efficiently, and directed toward higher quality and the right work that fits what we are doing. So that is that's our primary idea here, and hopefully that was of some value to you. And I'm going to go ahead and turn off the screen here, the share, and take any particular questions that you may have. And I'll take a drink of water to give space for people to do this. I see there's a question in the chat. Adam says, Tana has a lot more built into since I was able to pay attention to it. How do we find out about these changes? Do you have them in T4A or someplace else? Everything you saw there, Adam, is in some way represented within T4A. That was my own personal workspace, so some of it's a little bit different in terms of the naming or whatever because I'm iterating on my own stuff in there. But functionally, that's there. Yeah, and I talk about I have my various live sessions within Tana for Action as well. So you want to pop into one and ask some questions. I'm certainly happy to show you some things there.
Yeah, it certainly looks like there's a lot of new stuff. Like you brought up projects, and there was a sidebar with sub-projects.
Yeah, and
And
all of that is my build of Tana for Action. But yeah, So yeah,
and
that's
I
all there.
Tana is like updating itself at a furious pace.
Yeah, that's built on top of Tana's related action or related content rather feature. And there's also another thing at play. I didn't show it on here because it wasn't part of I wasn't demoing Tana features, but I can actually turn that dashboard on and off. And that relies on some background, some new features that Tana has as well. So I'm not in a position where I have to, look at it all the time.
Well, perhaps I'll schedule a one-on-one with you and we can go over some of that.
Sure, absolutely.
Okay.
We can do that.
Thanks, RJ.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other thoughts? Any other discussion points? Any other questions? Any insights? Any challenges to what I have to say? I think you all, most of you have been in my community for a while. You all know that I'm comfortable with about whatever. So fire away.
It's Dave Carter, been a while since I visited with you, RJ. I just want to say this it was my personal experience exactly. So was quite drawn when I saw the announcement because this is exactly what I've sort of been self-discovering myself. So it's great to see great minds think alike.
Or at least ours do. We'll say great because it makes me feel better. That's good. I like that.
Well, don't forget, they also say fools never differ.
You be quiet, Adam. I answered your question already. Who do you think you are? All right. Anybody else? Any other questions or insights on the or challenges or what have you? You can just jump in, or you can raise your hand. Whatever's easier. If not, we'll call it good. I certainly do have another call coming up at noon, so I don't mind taking a moment off here. Hopefully, this was of value to you. I will include, and I'll also follow up in the space with a link to the audition. Nice. You can see I'm in a musical headspace here in the attention audit workshop. And so that you can have a look at that. But also, we're in the community here. You can ask questions anytime you want in the action powered productivity community. So, if you just have a question, don't be afraid to ask or to reach out to me in a DM. Excellent. It's good to have you all here today. I appreciate your attention, and I hope that this was valuable for you in thinking about how your attention can be leveraged for the future. what Mark, you say, can I back here on the use of recurring tasks or wait for another session? Go ahead. I mean, maybe go ahead and ask, Mark. I can certainly answer it here.
Yeah. I sent you a message. I was a while out of Tana and now coming back, and was reviewing all the videos. But I'm a little bit puzzled with the use of recurring tasks. Is that whenever I start with recurring tasks, I saw the double entries in the references, and that got me confused, and I don't know how the automated things work.
Easy thing to understand here. In the references, first of all, just ignore that down there. I don't use the references at all. There's no way, there isn't actually a double entry happening. It's that recurring tasks have two date fields in them. The one you use, the one that schedules it for, your attention. And then also an originally scheduled on field. That one is managing the recurrence of things that are repeating from when they were originally scheduled. However, there's no way to shut that off in the references. So it's just seeing two date fields and giving you both. And in a lot of cases, when it's scheduled is also when it was originally scheduled. And so it's showing up on the same day with those. So you can safely ignore that. Now, if you're using a calendar view on those tasks and you're seeing both, you need to go into the options on that, or the settings of that view, go to the option called date fields, and then check scheduled on specifically. That way it'll only include that date in that calendar view. But that's why you see two, because there are actually two dates in there. And without further instruction, Tana's not sure which one of the dates has relevance to you.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Excellent.
I will give it another try.
I promise it's not too bad. And if you want to hop into one of the live T4A
Yeah,
sessions,
I will again as
yeah,
of
we can.
as
Yeah,
of now. This is the first one I'm attending now. I saw it passing by, and I said I had to jump in.
I love it. It was good to see you, Mark.
Yeah.
All right. Anybody else? Any other questions, thoughts? Going once? Twice? Three times a lady. Sorry, I'm a little crazy. See you all. Take care.